My name's Cory and I'm kind of into rabbits. So for me, it all started with a 1979 two-door early Westy Rabbit. I bought the car end of 2011 through a Vortex post. Car was local to me. I was looking for quite some time. I really don't know or remember what influenced me to go to Volkswagen. I'd say there was some influence for some friends that I graduated high school with, a little bit from my dad. He had some of these cars growing up and actually still had parts laying around the house, which I always thought was neat. But ultimately, I think I just fell in love with the style of the Mk1 platform. The car was very low mileage in original condition overall. It didn't really need much other than just neglected maintenance from years and years of sitting. But it was functional, it was drivable, it was everything. It was still the 1.6 on the mechanical CIS with the 4-speed, and that's how I drove it for years. I would just tinker with it on the weekends and learn everything I could, and started by cleaning up the engine bay and bringing all that back to life, and would have to diagnose vacuum issues or thermotime issues. I remember buying a thermotime for the thing and it wasn't the issue, and then I kept stocking up on them every time I'd go to junkyards, and all the little CIS components that I never knew if they'd fail or not, and still to this day have way too much of that stuff. But yeah, I drove that car for years, to college, and everywhere, improving it as I went along. So eventually I decided to take the brown car to the next step, I guess you'd say, and do more of a build and find a daily driver so that wouldn't be on the road. I bought a 88 Mark II Jetta that I daily for quite some time, and then stepped up to the yellow 80 Sunbright yellow truck. That was actually my first ABA swap, the truck. I had originally had the idea to carb the 1.6 for the brown car, and then switched over to the concept of ABA, mainly because it's a hard motor to beat, and I just really realized what I wanted being a driver. I just want to drive the car. That's what I've always done when it was the 1.6 4-speed, and that's just what I want to do now, just gaining the knowledge and the concept of the swap. And to me, it's just the perfect upgrade for these cars. The fact that they bolt right in on factory mounts, the fact that they clear everything, and the fact that they have a really nice power to weight ratio, modernized fuel injection, simple to maintain, parts are cheap. They're $100 motors all day, and it's just what I wanted out of it. So the brown car was always very original feeling to me. The car was very low mileage when I bought it, very original and untouched, and I never wanted to go much farther than that. I never wanted to take it too far. There was just the right amount of upgrade in my mind. OEM plus, I guess you could say. But that was always a limiting factor with the brown car as well. But I loved it. So my plan was just to do a clean OEM engine bay, ABA swap, but make it look factory to an extent. At that time, I was buying a whole bunch of these cars. I would find them cheap or talk to this person or that person and end up scooping them up. And some got parted, some I held on to, some I sold. I don't really regret any of them. They were all just stepping stones to the bigger and better things over time. But you never pass on the $200 Rabbit, especially if it's early and has interior bits or anything like that. They're just awesome cars. Eventually, I built a set of BBS RSs for the car, drove all the way down to Pittsburgh for a stock unsplit set of 16-inch RSs, figured out all my specs, offset, backspacing, whatever you want to call it, and decided to fill and redrill, powder coat the wheels, and do a slim lip, staggered lip, half-inch front, 1-inch rear, also staggered cap, quarter inch cap front, a quarter cap front, half cap rear. Just once again, a very OEM plus traditional clean Mark 1 build. So the sport truck came about from a friend of mine. He called me one day, said he bought a Rabbit truck, sweet, and went and checked it out. It was a sport truck, super sweet. But the only downfall to it is it was very, very rusty. And he drove it for a little bit and decided to eventually tear into it, was going to replace the strut towers and really give it the whole 9 yards. And that just never got completed. Truck sat for a while. I've always known about the truck, always thought it was cool, but never really wanted that big of a project. Finally, I gave in. It was just too cheap to not, I guess you could say. I had a motor, I had a transmission, I had all the stuff to finish it and put it back together, but first thing to address was the rust factor. So I brought that thing home and put it up on jack stands and just started smashing it with a sledgehammer, seeing what moved, what fell off, what the problem areas were. Ended up bracing it all up, kind of leaving all the holes, but just doing more of a tube cage style, bracing, put the structure back in it. ABA swapped it with an unknown motor I had laying around, the original 4-speed from my 79 Brown car, and an unsprung racing clutch that I had brand new in the bag that I bought in a parts hoard a couple years earlier. And put the truck together, super cheap, but not haggard or anything. The rust aspect of the truck was what it was, but I wanted to give it a second life in the work that I did to it and actually make it something. And 2 years later, I'm still daily driving it, so it has to say something about it. But there's a lot of people that want that truck, but I had offered to my friend that I bought it from that when I'm done with it, I will sell it back to him for basically what I have in it. He never really wanted to get rid of the truck. It was more of a need to, and I just want to see him back with it. And so eventually that will happen. When I'm now done with it, once I move on to a bigger, better truck of my own, I will sell that back to him, and hopefully he will enjoy it for years to come then. So this car here is a 1980 four-door deluxe early Westy Rabbit. Basically, the concept of this is to create the car that I always wanted. Knowing what I know now from what I had learned, just combination of everything that I've ever absorbed into a car, the car. I bought the car up in Cleveland, Ohio area, about 5.5, 6 hours away. And we left super early in the morning, went and checked it out. Everything was exactly what I had wanted it to be. But I was told before we got there that the car had electrical issues. Wasn't 100% sure what that meant. Didn't really mean much to me as long as it ran. And get there to find out that it had no headlight, taillight, turn signals, wipers, brake light, anything. So didn't care. We just did it. I put a $20 bill in the tank and we bombed home for 6 hours. Got home just before dark without a single hiccup. And it was just a really fun experience with the car. I pulled the motor the next day, started stripping it down with everything that I didn't want, and got on to building a tip-over rotisserie jig for the car so I could clean, prep, seal, and paint the whole underside and just kind of give it all a fresh start. The whole concept with this car is to basically leave the aesthetic how it is and just bring the paint back to life, leave all the chips and dents and dings and little things for the most part, but every component on the car I want to be new. So every bushing, bearing, and seal, everything is painted and powder coated. It's even a 0-mile crate motor ABA 2-liter that I have bought for the thing. And it's just going to be the one and done, I guess you could say, after all this time. But it's going to be full C2 swap car. It's going to be the brand new ABA, like I mentioned, just stock OBD2 ABA with a mild cam, GTI 210 clutch, FF code 5-speed, and it's just going to be mildly lowered on the stock skinnies with single white wall, silver steely. Just OG perfection. The car kind of got put on hold here once I bought my house, and I do want to dive back into it eventually and try to wrap it up maybe this winter, but I'm just realizing the beauty of not having a deadline. I still have the sport truck, and I still have my Turkish screen Mark III Golf that I daily on the side, so there's really no reason to rush to get this car done. At this point, 90% of it is done. It's basically just finishing up the wiring and some interior bits, but everything underneath is all completed. All new brake lines, fuel lines, tanks in, all exhausts. It's just a bunch of little detail work at this point, but we'll get there. And that's just kind of where I am with this stuff anymore. Like, I still love these cars, but not to the extent that I used to of running to Maryland after work to go get that one and only part. I'm not into it that much. I still have an entire attic full of parts and my other detached garage full of the larger stuff. Plenty of parts to keep me going with the stuff I currently have. But I'm very happy with everything I have, and I don't even really want any other cars, Volkswagen wise. Between this, the Turkish green Mark III, I'm going to keep around as kind of a secondary daily and a winter beater. I have my cage car up there, which is a 2-liter 16-valve turbo concept. A lot of custom work in that. The reason I really like that car is because when I had the brown car, with it being such of an OG kind of originality car, you could only take the build so far, in my opinion, without, really chopping the thing up, which I didn't want to do. So the concept of my cage car up there is kind of no rules, anything goes, everything custom. And I'm really looking forward to getting into that eventually as well. It all just comes down to time. The only other car that I would like to buy yet, if I find the right one, would be a 2- or 4-door early Westy hatchback Inca brown car. I'd like to find a car that is a comparable condition to my Snowway snowplow that I have. I want to put that plow on a hatchback car and recreate the original Popular Mechanics advertisement of the Snowway snowplow. I'd love to take that to local shows and show off the history and, show that piece. It's not a one-off piece, but it's a pretty rare piece anymore as far as they go. And I would just really like to keep that alive and display it on an actual car. So, but yeah, time will tell. We'll see what comes of it all. And other than that, it's all just about the drive for me. The biggest thing that I always try to stress whenever I'm talking to somebody that's getting into it is to just make sure you enjoy what you're doing. And I think that was the main appeal to me with the sport truck, because I never really had something that was that rusty and just didn't care. Ultimately the work I put into the truck made it be something, but it's still full of holes and it still doesn't look the greatest, but it's a blast. I drive it every day and it gets more attention than anything else I've ever had. It's amazing. But it's just about the fun. You're driving the car, you're enjoying the car. And definitely I'm all for swapping and tearing into things and learning as much as you can, but just make sure you're enjoying it.